I'm Anna. I'm 29. My old life? I was a graphic designer. But for the last 13 months, my entire world stopped. My job wasn't designing logos. It was being my mother's 24/7 caregiver. My mother has been gone for barely a week. My brother, Ben, is in her kitchen. He slams a piece of paper down on the table, and the coffee mugs jump. It's her bank statement. His finger stabs at a single line item. "What is this $20,000 transfer, Anna?" His voice is ice. I can't breathe. "You manipulated her," he hisses. "You waited until she was on her deathbed." He doesn't stop. He leans in. "I am suing you for inheritance theft." I just looked at him. My vision went sharp. This was the man who only visited twice in over a year. I didn't say a word. I didn't cry. I just picked up my keys and walked right out of the house. Have you ever sacrificed everything for your family only to be accused of being a criminal by the one who did nothing at all? This is the story of how I had to fight my own brother for a gift my mother insisted I take. If you've ever been the family scapegoat, you're going to want to hear this. The contrast between me and Ben, it wasn't new. Growing up, he was the golden child, the one who was so smart and going places. I was the responsible one, the capable one, which, I learned, is just code for being the one who gets handed all the work and none of the praise. But our mother's illness. It took that old, cracked foundation and just shattered it. When she got the diagnosis, when we knew it was going to be hard, I was the one. I was the one who sat at her kitchen table, looked at her terrified eyes, and said, "I'll move back. I'll take care of you." I was 28. I had a life. I had a freelance career I was finally building. My own apartment that smelled like coffee and turpentine from my painting hobby. I had clients. I had me. I packed it all up in boxes. I put my career on hold, forwarded my mail, and my entire world shrank to the four walls of my childhood home. The smell of coffee was replaced by the smell of antiseptic and chicken broth. My job wasn't designing websites anymore. It was managing medications, changing bedpans, and sitting through the endless, crushing silence of 3 a.m. 13 months. And Ben? My brother Ben lives 30 minutes away. A half-hour drive. You can listen to a podcast episode in that time. You can drive to the good grocery store and back. It's nothing. In over a year. In more than 52 weeks of me being there 24/7, Ben visited. Twice. I remember the first time. He stood in the doorway of her room, his coat still on. He looked inconvenienced. He asked how she was feeling. She said, "Fine." He nodded. He stayed for maybe 15 minutes. The second time, he brought flowers. He set them on the nightstand, checked his phone twice, and talked about a promotion he was up for at work. Then he said he had to get going. Twice. I know, because I counted. Every single day, I'd look at the clock, thinking, maybe today. Maybe he'll come. Maybe he'll offer to sit with her so I can take a shower that lasts longer than 3 minutes. He never did. I finally broke down and called him. I was so tired I was slurring my words. "Ben, please," I begged him. "I just need a break. I just need one afternoon. Can you please just come and sit with her for a few hours?" There was a long pause on the line. And then he said it. The words that still echo in my head. "Anna, I can't handle it," he sounded frustrated, like I was the one putting him out. I can't handle seeing her like that." I hung up the phone. I didn't even say goodbye. I went into the bathroom, locked the door, and I just stared at myself in the mirror. You can't handle it? My hands were raw from the constant washing and the antiseptic wipes. My back ached, a deep, permanent throb from lifting her. I hadn't slept for more than 4 hours at a stretch in a year. You can't handle it? Who handled it when she woke up at 2 a.m., terrified and confused? Who handled cleaning her when she was too weak to make it to the bathroom? Who handled the endless rattle of pill bottles, the hiss of the oxygen machine, the smell of sickness that sinks into everything? Who handled holding her hand when she cried, telling her it was okay, knowing it wasn't? That was me. I handled it. I handled all of it. Every single minute of every single day. And he, 30 minutes away, couldn't handle it. It happened about 3 weeks before she passed. It was a good morning. Those were rare, and they were precious. A good morning meant the sun wasn't an intrusion. I'd opened the curtains in her bedroom, and the light felt soft, not harsh. It meant she was sitting up against her pillows, breathing easier. The air in the room smelled like the toast and tea I'd brought her, not just sickness. It was quiet, hopeful, almost. She was frail, a bird wrapped in blankets. But when she looked at me, her eyes were sharp, clear. The fog of her bad days was gone. "Anna," she said, her voice quiet but firm, "bring me the laptop." I got it for her, thinking she wanted to look at old photos, or maybe I'd put on a movie for her. I set the tray table over her lap and placed it down. "Open the bank website," she said. I paused. "Mom, why?" "Just humor me, honey. Log me in." So I did. I typed in her password, my fingers moving over the keys, and the homepage loaded. Then she instructed me, "Go to transfers." I did. "Transfer to your account." My blood ran cold. "Mom, what are you doing?" "The amount," she said, ignoring me. 20000. Langwen Maywen. I pulled my hands back from the keyboard like it had burned me. "No," I said, my voice shaking. "Absolutely not. I can't. Mom, that's... no." I tried to rationalize. "That's your money. We need that for things. For bills." She just watched me. This small, frail woman in the bed, and she was suddenly the strongest person in the room. She reached out and grabbed my hand. Her skin was paper thin, but her grip was like steel. It startled me. She looked me right in the eye. "Anna," she said, and her voice didn't waver. "This is not inheritance. This is not about the will. This is a thank you." I just stared at her. "A thank you," she repeated, "for everything you have done for me this last year. For every single day. The will. That's for later. This is for now. This is for you." I tried to argue again. I said Ben wouldn't understand. "Ben," she said, and her voice was suddenly flat, "is not in this room. You are. You have been here. This is my choice. Now, please, do as I ask." She was my mother. And she was dying. And in that moment, she was clearer and more determined than I had seen her in a year. It wasn't a request. It was an order. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely type. I selected my account from the drop-down list. I typed in the numbers. $20,000. I hit confirm. The screen loaded. Transfer successful. She let go of my hand and just nodded. Once. Then she lay back against the pillows and closed her eyes, and the moment was over. I put the laptop away. The whole thing felt sacred. It was a private, painful, beautiful moment of recognition. It was her acknowledging me, my sacrifice, my 13 months. I never thought to mention it to Ben. Why would I? It had nothing to do with him. It wasn't his business. It wasn't part of the 50/50 split. It was a gift. A thank you, from her. To me. I never imagined that her last act of kindness would become the weapon he would use against me. When Mom passed, the grief was... it wasn't a wave. It was a fog. A thick, suffocating pressure that muted the whole world. Everything just stopped. The funeral was a blur of black clothes and hushed voices, people I hadn't seen in years, patting my arm, telling me how strong I was. I wasn't strong. I was hollow. I was the one who held her hand when it ended. And now, I was just an empty shell, running on autopilot. And then, just days after we buried her, Ben suddenly became very involved. But not with me. Not with the mourning. He didn't sit with me and share stories. He didn't ask how I was. He got involved with the paperwork. He'd been named the executor of the will. And suddenly, the man who couldn't handle visiting his sick mother was perfectly capable of handling her death. He was efficient. He was cold. He was busy. The will itself was exactly what we all expected. It was simple, just as Mom had always said. Her estate, the house, her savings, her belongings was to be split 50/50. 50% for me, 50% for Ben. I was fine with that. I expected that. I'd never wanted more. I never felt entitled to more, just because I was the one who stayed. Because in my mind, the will and the gift were two totally separate things. The will was for the estate, it was the assets she'd left behind. The $20,000. That was a gift. A thank you for services rendered. It was a transaction between my mother and me, for the 13 months of my life I had given her. It was done, settled, and finished, 3 weeks before she'd passed. It had nothing to do with the will, and it had nothing to do with Ben. But Ben didn't see it that way. As the executor, he got access to everything, every account, every statement, every piece of paper, while I was doing the real work of death. He was doing the math. I was in Mom's bedroom. It still smelled like her lavender sachet and the lotion I used on her hands. I was trying to figure out how to pack up a life. How do you put a person in a box? I was holding her favorite cardigan, this soft, worn-out blue thing, and I was just breaking. The grief was finally hitting me, sharp and overwhelming. And while I was in there, crying into her sweater, Ben was in the kitchen. He wasn't packing. He wasn't grieving. He was at her desk. He had binders open. He had stacks of mail. And he was combing through her bank statements, line by line. Like an auditor, like a detective looking for a crime. I could hear the flick, flick, flick of the papers as he turned them. I could hear the aggressive click of his pen. I came out of the bedroom, wiping my eyes, and he was just staring at this one piece of paper. His back was to me. "What is that?" I asked. He turned around slowly. His eyes were narrow. He didn't look sad. He looked furious. He held up the bank statement. That's when he found it, the $20,000 transfer. And to him, to the man who lived 30 minutes away, the man who couldn't handle seeing her, it wasn't a thank you. It was a theft. I didn't even make it to my car. My hand was on the door handle when my phone buzzed in my back pocket. I pulled it out. A text from Ben. "You can't just walk away from this, Anna." I got in the car, my fingers fumbling with the keys. The engine started, but I just sat there in the driveway of my mother's house, the house that had been my prison for 13 months. Buzz. Another text. "That's half my money. You stole it." Buzz. "I'm not kidding. I'm calling a lawyer." My hands were shaking. I was still clutching my keys, the metal biting into my palm. I couldn't drive. I could barely think. I tried to reason with him. My thumbs were clumsy on the screen. I texted, "Ben, that's not what happened. She wanted me to have it." I typed out my mother's exact words, the words that were burned into my memory. She said it was a thank you for the year of care I gave her. She said it wasn't part of the will. I hit send. I stared at the screen. The little delivered receipt popped up. For a second, there was silence. I thought, maybe that's it. Maybe he just needed to hear the truth. Maybe he didn't know. The 3 little dots appeared. He was typing. My phone buzzed so hard it rattled against the steering wheel. His reply, "I don't care what you say," she said. My stomach dropped. The next message came immediately after. "You were alone with her for a year, Anna. You had plenty of time to get in her head. You manipulated a dying woman. You're a thief." Thief. He used that word. It felt violent. He was my brother. He knew what I'd done. He knew I'd given up my life. And he was calling me a thief. And then, the final text, the real reason. "I want my half. You owe the estate $10,000. You can transfer it or I can sue you for it. Your choice. Iwan Megan." It wasn't about our mother. It wasn't about what was right. It was a shakedown. My hands were shaking so hard I dropped the phone. It clattered onto the floor mat. I just sat there, staring at the windshield. For one awful, creeping second. His certainty made me doubt. Did I do something wrong? That voice. The responsible one voice. The one that always takes the blame, it whispered. Was it too much money? Did I take advantage? Was he right? My mind flashed back. I wasn't in the car anymore. I was back in her room. The smell of tea, the soft light. I saw her hand. I felt her grip, her frail fingers surprisingly strong on my wrist. I heard her voice, clear and firm. "This is not inheritance. This is a thank you. Ben is not in this room." "You are," she insisted. She forced me to do it. This wasn't greed. This wasn't manipulation. This was her will, her true will, her last act of agency, her way of finally seeing me. The doubt vanished. It was replaced by something cold, something sharp. I picked up the phone from the floor. I read his text again. You owe the estate $10,000. He wasn't grieving. He was calculating. He was weaponizing my grief, my exhaustion, my love for her, to line his own pockets. He was turning her final, kindest gesture into something ugly and illegal. He was turning me into the villain, so he could play the victim, all the way to the bank. I turned the phone off. I put the car in reverse, and I drove away. I stopped responding. I turned my phone off, then I turned it back on and just blocked his number. I needed silence. I needed to grieve. My mother was gone. The center of my world for 13 months, the entire purpose of my existence, was gone. I was sitting in the middle of a crater, and all I wanted was to just sit, to process, to maybe even cry properly for the first time. But he wouldn't let me. The block on his number just meant the calls went straight to voicemail, and my phone, in vibrate mode, became this angry, buzzing hornet on my nightstand. Buzz, a new voicemail. Buzz, an email. Buzz, another voicemail. He was relentless. He couldn't be bothered to visit, but now that there was money on the line, he was the most motivated man on earth. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I'd sit in the shower, the water running hot, just to drown out the phantom buzzing in my head. But eventually, I had to look. I had to know what he was doing. I opened my voicemail app. There were nine unheard messages from Ben. I pressed play on the latest one. His voice filled my quiet, grief-stricken apartment. It wasn't sad. It wasn't angry. Not like before. It was smug. Hey, Anna. You can't ignore me forever. I've talked to a lawyer. My heart stopped. He told me what you did has a name. It's called undue influence. A classic case, he said. Lonely old woman. Isolated caregiver. You see where this is going? You took advantage of a dying woman, Anna. My blood turned to ice. Undue influence. He'd found a legal-sounding dagger to twist. I clicked the next message. More of the same. Mom would be so ashamed of you. She trusted you. And you just helped yourself to her bank account. Ashamed. The word hit me like a slap. She would be ashamed? She, who forced me to take the money. Who would she really be ashamed of? The daughter who held her hand, or the son who was now trying to steal that daughter's thank you? I was shaking again, but it wasn't from fear. Not anymore. It was rage. A deep, cold, pure rage that was burning off all the grief and all the doubt. I didn't need to listen to the other messages. I knew what they were. I deleted them, one by one. Then, an email popped up. The subject line was, "Final warning." I opened it. It was short. It was brutal. Anna, you have 1 week, 7 days. You put the $10,000 into the estate account, or I am filing the lawsuit. I'm not just suing you for the $20,000. I'm suing you for inheritance theft, and I'm going to tell the lawyer to contest the entire will based on undue influence. You'll get nothing. You'll be lucky if you don't get investigated. 1 week. Ben. I read it twice. 1 week. $10,000. Or he would try to take everything. He would drag our mother's name, my name, through a humiliating, public, legal battle. All because he couldn't handle visiting, and his jealousy and greed were eating him alive. I was terrified. For about 10 seconds, I was paralyzed by it. The thought of court, of lawyers, of losing. But then, that terror burned off. It was like a fever breaking. And all that was left was steel. I set my phone down. I looked at his email. 1 week? I thought, okay, Ben. He wanted a war? Fine. He wanted to talk about the law? Fine. He wanted lawyers? He was about to get one. I didn't just find a lawyer. I found the best estate lawyer in the city. I took the $20,000, my mother's gift, the money my brother was trying to steal, and I used it to pay the retainer. If Ben wanted to turn my mother's thank you into a legal battle, then I would use her gift to fight back. It felt right. It felt like she was still protecting me. I walked into the law office. It was intimidating. It was silent, except for the quiet click-clack of keyboards. The air smelled like old books and expensive wood. Everything was dark, polished mahogany and dim, respectful lighting. I sat in a stiff, deep green leather chair that sighed when I moved. I felt small. I felt like a fraud, like a child who was about to be found out. My lawyer, Mr. Harris, came in. He was older, in his 50s, with a kind, serious face. He didn't rush me. He just sat opposite me, folded his hands on his massive, clean desk, and said, "Tell me everything. From the beginning." So I did. I told him everything. The 13 months of 24/7 care, my brother's two visits, the 30-minute drive he couldn't be bothered to make, the excuse that he couldn't handle it. My voice was quiet, but it didn't shake. I was just stating the facts. Then I told him about the good morning, the laptop, the bank transfer. I told him, word for word, what my mother had said. This is not inheritance. This is a thank you. I told him about Ben's ambush in the kitchen, the bank statement, the accusations, inheritance theft, manipulation. And finally, I pulled out my phone. I showed him the email. The final threat. Undue influence. The 1-week deadline. I braced myself. This was the moment. My stomach was in a cold, tight knot. Was Ben right? Was I a fool? Had I misunderstood everything? Was I about to be told by this calm, expensive lawyer that I had, in fact, broken the law? Was I about to be humiliated in court, lose my mother's last gift, and be branded a thief by my own family? Was I the villain in my own story? Mr. Harris finished reading the email. He took off his glasses. He polished them, slowly, with a small cloth. He put them back on. He looked me right in the eye. And he said the 4 words that changed everything. He has no case. I must have misheard him. What? Anna, he said, leaning forward. Your brother has absolutely no case. He's blowing smoke. He's a bully, and he's counting on you being too scared and too grief-stricken to fight back. He picked up a pen. What your mother gave you is called a gift inter vivos. It's a legal term. It means a gift given by a person of sound mind during their life. She had clear intent. She told you exactly what it was for. It is not part of the estate. It has nothing to do with the will. It is 100%, unequivocally, legally, yours. I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath until it came out in a single, shuddering gasp. I put my hand over my mouth. I wasn't hollow anymore. The snap. It wasn't loud. It wasn't an explosion. It was a click. It was the sound of my spine, which had been bent for 13 months, finally straightening. It was the feeling of my grief and my rage and my fear clicking into place and becoming a resolve. I looked at Mr. Harris. The small, scared girl who had walked in was gone. Send him a letter, I said. My voice was clear. Tell him the gift is legal. Tell him he has no case. And tell him to stop contacting me. Immediately. Tell him any further contact will be considered harassment. Mr. Harris smiled, a small, thin smile. It will be my pleasure. The letter, Mr. Harris sent wasn't emotional, it wasn't angry. It was cold. It was a beautiful, 2-page document of pure, unassailable legal fact. It was printed on thick, watermarked paper. It was sent via registered mail, so I knew Ben had to sign for it. It laid out the timeline. My 13 months of care, his 2 visits. It cited the specific statute, gift inter vivos. It explained, in very clear, very simple terms, that my mother was of sound mind, that the gift was an expression of her gratitude, and that it was legally, morally, and ethically separate from the estate. The final paragraph was my favorite. It stated that any attempt to sue, contest the will on these grounds, or contact me directly with further demands would be considered frivolous and malicious harassment, and that we would aggressively pursue all available sanctions and counterclaims. My lawyer, Mr. Harris, got one phone call from Ben. He told me about it later. He said Ben was furious. That was the word from the update, and it was the word Mr. Harris used. He apparently yelled. He cursed. He called me names. He called Mr. Harris names. Mr. Harris, I imagine, just sat there, polishing his glasses, and waited for him to run out of steam. And when Ben finally wound down, Mr. Harris simply asked him, "Are you, or are you not, represented by counsel? Because if you are, they should be making this call, and if you are not, I suggest you get some. Have a good day." And he hung up. After that, silence. The legal threats, they just vanished. Poof. Gone. Ben couldn't bully me anymore. He'd brought a knife to a gunfight, and when he was confronted with actual, real-world power, the law, he did what he always did. He couldn't handle it. He folded. He had no case, and now, finally, he knew it. He couldn't bully me, and he couldn't bully the law. The rest of the estate settlement was quiet. It was done through lawyers. I never had to speak to Ben again. I never had to see him. The will was executed exactly as it was written, 50/50. Ben got his 50% of the estate. I got my 50% of the estate. And I kept every single penny of my mother's $20,000. Ben got his money. He got exactly what he was owed. But he has to live with what he did. He has to live with knowing that he tried to steal from the sister who had sacrificed everything. He has to live with his own fury, that bitter, impotent rage of a greedy man who was finally and publicly told no. He got his half of the house. But he lost his sister. And me? What did I do with that $20,000? A month later, after the paperwork was all signed, I booked a flight. I used my mother's thank you money to say thank you to myself. I took a vacation, just me. I went somewhere warm, somewhere the water was so clear it looked like glass. I remember the first morning, I walked out onto the beach. The air was soft, it smelled clean. It smelled like salt and sun, not antiseptic and sickness. I stood at the edge of the water. The sand was soft under my feet, not cold linoleum. The only sound was the gentle shush of the waves, not the hiss of an oxygen machine or the rattle of a pill bottle. And I just stood there. For the first time in over a year, no one needed me. No one was demanding anything from me. No one was calling me a thief. It was just quiet. I finally cried for my mom. I mourned her, not the sickness, not the stress, not the fight with Ben. I mourned her, her smile, the way she used to grip my hand. I let all the grief, and all the rage, and all the exhaustion of the last 13 months just wash off me. And for the first time, I felt clean. I felt peace. I learned something, standing on that beach. My found family, the person who saved me, it wasn't my blood, it wasn't my brother. It was a lawyer named Mr. Harris, a man I paid. A stranger, he was the one who listened. He was the one who saw the facts. He was the one who validated my sacrifice when my own brother tried to turn it into a crime. My mother's last act of love was to say, "Thank you." My brother's first act of grief was to show his greed. I learned that family isn't just about who you're related to. It's not about blood. It's about who shows up. It's about who values your sacrifice, not just what they can get from you. If you've ever felt like the scapegoat, if you've ever been the responsible one, if you've ever been made to feel guilty for just existing, hit that subscribe button. You're not alone.